Hello everyone and welcome to Joy As It Flies. In this tutorial I'm going to be teaching you how to sew my new favourite style of skirt. It's called a side split skirt and it's loosely based off a sort of Edwardian walking dress. But the three great things about it is it's an adjustable waist, there's no zip, and this pattern has pockets. So in this tutorial I'm going to be teaching you how to draft the pattern and then sew the skirt. So the way I create the pattern is maybe a little unusual, but it makes sense logically to me, so hopefully it will make sense to you. If you have any questions though, make sure you ask them in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them. So without further ado, let's get making the pattern. Here is a list of things that you will need. Approximately 4 meters of fabric. This may change according to your size. I'm using viscose, but any dressmaking fabric is fine. Also, you will need a small amount of interfacing. I'm using medium iron-on, but sew-on is fine. You will also need some mock-up fabric. So this is any fabric that you would not normally use for a sewing project, or maybe is not in the best of condition. And I'll explain a bit more about it later on. Then you'll need your general sewing equipment, so that's scissors, pins, thread, and either a sewing machine or an overlocker. I also use metal grommets in this pattern, but don't worry if you don't have any, because I do have a separate way of sewing this without them. You will also need drawing and measuring equipment, and this pattern does use quite a lot of pattern paper. So a trick I use, I buy a large roll of plain wallpaper. It may sound crazy, but it's a lot cheaper than pattern paper. It's really thick and you get so much of it. I've also seen people use wrapping paper, so there are a couple of ideas that you can use instead of buying normal pattern paper. Now before we get drawing the pattern, you're just going to need to take 2 measurements, which are your waist and the length you would like the skirt to be. So for example, I want mine to be 32 inches long. So before we get making the pattern, I'll just give a little explanation about why I use mock-up fabric in it. I find that to create the panels of the skirt, it's easier to create a half of a half circle skirt and then cut it so you get the exact shape. So that's why you need some mock-up fabric. Lay your mock-up fabric down flat and don't fold it in half. And get your calculator out and we're going to do a bit of maths. So take your waist measurement and divide it by pi. You'll always get a long decimal, so round it up, so mine will be from 7.9 with lots of numbers to 8. This will be used for your waist measurement. Place your measuring tape along one of the edges of your fabric and make a mark where your waist measurement is. Then keeping the beginning of your measuring tape in the corner, gradually move the other end around your fabric, making marks every now and again on the fabric. Continue doing this until you come to the other edge of the fabric. Connect all the marks up and you will have the waist of your skirt. Now we're going to do a similar sort of thing, but starting from your waist measurement, measure the length you want your skirt to be and make a mark on the fabric. Then gradually moving your measuring tape around, make a mark every now and again. Unfortunately you can't see me doing it because I moved out the camera frame, but you should almost get like a pizza slice shape. Now just connect the marks up like you did before, and then you can cut the shape out. Now it's time to create the panel pieces, so measure the waist of your half of a half circle skirt and you're going to want to quarter that measurement. So I do the easy trick of folding the tape measure in half and then folding it in half again, and you have your measurement. Now mark your 4 quarters on your fabric, so you are only going to have 3 marks, but you will have 4 quarters. Now from that first quarter mark we're going to make one of the panels. So place your measuring tape or meter stick down the fabric and you can basically eye where it's meant to be. It will be wide at the bottom, but not too much that it looks strange. Now, once you've got the placement that you want, draw a line down it. Doesn't have to be too neat, because obviously when we transfer it to paper, we can make any alterations that are needed. Then from the other side, so this will be your third quarter mark, do the exact same thing. Now you can cut them out. So once that's done, you will have 3 panels, one big main one and then 2 smaller ones that are the same. You can get rid of one of the smaller ones and the main ones, put them to the side for now, because now we're just going to be working with one of the smaller ones. All we are going to do is cut it in half. So I just fold it in half and then cut down the fold. Anything that's not neat can be fixed when we transfer it to paper. Now that's the majority of the pattern making done. All in all, you should have 3 panels. So your main one, then the second biggest one is the side panel, and that little one, I call it a pocket panel, just really to give it a name. It will make more sense once we start sewing. Now it's time to transfer all of the fabric patterns to paper. So starting off with your main panel, fold it in half and place it on your paper. Then all around the edge, you're going to want to add 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's always a good idea to write down all the information about the pattern piece on the paper. So write down on this one that it's for the side split skirt, and this is the main panel piece. You're going to want to cut 4 of them on the fold. That's a lot, I know. I always also write whether it has seam allowance or not, and then on the straight side, write down that that is where the fold is. Now you can cut your first pattern piece out. Repeat the process with your next 2 panels, but with these ones you don't need to fold them in half because they're not so wide. And then write down on the smaller one that it's the pocket panel for a side split skirt. I managed to spell panel right this time. You're going to want to cut 2 of these, and that it includes seam allowance. Then the other panel is the side panel. You're going to want to cut 4 of these, and it includes seam allowance. Then you can cut them both out. Now we're going to move on to the pattern pieces that we haven't already drafted on fabric. To draft the pocket pattern, I also use a pattern master ruler, but you could use either like a plate or a bowl, anything with a curve for it. So starting with the pocket pieces, you're going to want to draw a rectangle of 5 inches by 9 inches. So using either your ruler or your bowl or anything with a curve, make a curve on one side of the pocket. It's nothing accurate, it's kind of just do it by eye. Once you've done that, you're going to want to add 1/4 inch seam allowance around the pocket, apart from the top side. Now name your pattern piece as the pocket, and you're going to be wanting to cut 4 of them. Then cut it out. Next we have the waistband pieces. So normally you would just have one waistband piece, but for this pattern it's into 2. So you have the front and the back. And starting with the front waistband, you are going to want to take your waist measurement, half it, and then -2 inches. And then draw a line of that measurement, and then create that line into a rectangle, and the width of it is going to be 3.5 inches. Now this is just a measurement that I like my waistbands to be, but you can change it if you would like a thinner or thicker waistband. Now this already includes seam allowance, so we can just write straight on it that it's the front waistband, and you're going to want to cut one on the fold, and then mark one of the shortest sides as the fold. Then just cut it out. Now we're going to do a similar thing with the back waistband. So take your waist measurement and half it, and then draw a line of that measurement. And it's going to be by 3.5 inches as before. Once you've done that, you can write on it that it's the back waistband for the side split skirt, and you're going to want to cut one on the fold. And as before, one of the shortest sides is the fold. And once you've cut this one out, you have your 2 waistbands all done. Now we're moving on to the 2 last pattern pieces, which are the front and back ties. So starting with the front ties, you're going to want to draw a rectangle of 14 by 2.5 inches. This is already with seam allowance, so you just write down on it that it's the side split skirt and the front ties. And you're going to want to cut 2 of them both on the fold, and one of the short sides is the fold. Now before I cut this out, I'm going to just draw the pattern for the back ties, which is a rectangle of 20 by 1.5 inches. Then write down on this that it's the back ties, and you're going to want to cut 1 on the fold, and the short edge is the fold. Then you can go ahead and cut these 2 out. I also forgot to say that for your 2 waistband pieces, you're going to want to cut 1 of both on the fold out of fabric and 1 of interfacing. So just add that to your pattern as a reminder for later. Now we've finally finished creating all the pattern pieces, so just check that you have all of the ones shown here on the screen before we get cutting out a fabric. Now you can fold your fabric in half and pin all your patterns to it, making sure you note which ones need to go on the fold and how many you need of some. Then once you've pinned them all correctly, you can cut them out. Once everything's cut out, double check that you have everything and the right amounts with the list shown on the screen. Then just give everything a good iron and attach the interfacing to the 2 waistbands, whether it's sew on or iron on. Take one of your main panel pieces and place it right sides together with one of your side panel pieces. Pin it together, and then you're going to want to sew down that edge. Repeat with another side panel and the other side of your main panel piece. So then this will become your front piece. And then once you've sewn that, you're going to want to repeat that whole process with another main panel piece and your remaining 2 side panels. And then this will become your back piece. Now going back to your front piece, you're going to want to take one of the sides and measure 2 inches down. Then from this 2-inch mark, place one of your pocket pieces right sides together and pin it in place. Then sew down the pocket. Take it over to your iron and iron the seam up towards the pocket. Now repeat the same process with one of your pocket side panels and the corresponding pocket piece. Once you've done that, you're going to want to place both your pockets right sides together, at the same time matching the pocket panel with the front piece. Pin it all together. And now you're going to want to sew, starting from the top, coming down 1/2 inch into your pocket, then sewing around the pocket and back down to the end of the skirt. Then you can iron it flat and you have your first pocket all done. Now you're going to want to sew the 2 remaining pocket pieces and the pocket panel with the front piece in the exact same way. Now, not to get confusing, but we're moving back to the back piece, and you're going to want to pin one of your main panels right sides together with one of the sides. Then sew down it completely. Once you've done that, sew your last main panel piece in the same way. Now you're going to want to edge the two sides on your front piece and then your back piece. So if you're using an overlocker, I recommend you use your 4-thread stitch, but if you're only using a sewing machine, you can use a short zigzag stitch over the edge of the fabric. This is for the next couple of steps so we don't have a raw edge showing. Now place your back and front pieces right sides together and pin one of the sides. Then measure 12 inches from the top and make a mark on your fabric. And you're going to want to sew down the side, starting from that 12-inch mark all the way down to the bottom. If you have been using an overlocker so far, for this step, use just your straight stitch on your sewing machine. Then repeat on the other side. Once that's all sewn, you're going to want to move over to your ironing board and iron the seam open. This will naturally create a hem on the unsewn part above. So iron this hem and then pin it in place. Once you've ironed all 4 sides, you can then sew them all flat. Now we're moving on to the waistband and ties. So take one of your front ties and iron a hem on one of the shortest sides. Then fold it in half right sides together and sew it closed. Once it's all sewn, trim any excess fabric and turn it right sides out with the help of a safety pin. Iron it completely flat, and then you're going to want to over sew down one of the longest edges and the shortest edge that's hemmed. Once that's all done, repeat with your other front tie piece. Now moving over to your front waistband piece, you're going to want to take it over to your ironing board and iron it in half. Then you're going to want to iron a small hem on one of the longest sides. Now find the middle of your waistband. I do this by just folding it in half and then making a mark with the pin where the fold is. And you're going to want to find the middle in the exact same way with the front of your skirt. Now pin your waistband to your skirt right sides together, matching these two middle points. Make sure that the side you're pinning the waistband on is the side that isn't hemmed. Now once it's all pinned together, you are going to have some excess fabric on either sides. That's perfect. And now you're going to want to sew all the way down the waistband. Once it's sewn together, iron your seam towards the waistband. This will create a hem on either side of the excess fabric. Take one of your front ties and pin the raw edge to your waistband. You are going to want to place it approximately 1/4 of an inch from the hem you just ironed. Now fold your waistband right sides together. Make sure that both the longest edges of your waistband are folded over in your hem. Then sew down the shortest edge. Trim any excess fabric and clip the corners, and then you can turn your waistband right sides out. Then just repeat with the other side and your second front tie. Now fold the rest of your waistband in half, making sure that you cover the raw edge in the inside with the hem you ironed at the beginning. Make sure though that you pin on the right side of the fabric, because you're going to be over sewing it, and if it's on the wrong side, you'll get pins caught in your machine. Once it's all pinned down and you can't see any raw edges, over sew down your waistband. And your front waistband is all done. Now we're moving on to the back ties. So you're going to want to iron these almost as if it's bias tape. So iron your fabric in half and then open it back up again. Then you're going to want to iron one of the sides into the centre. Repeat with the other side. Then you're going to want to hem both of the shortest edges. Now fold it back in half and pin it in place. Now just sew it all closed. Now moving on to the back waistband, you're going to want to iron it in the exact same way you did the front. Then find the centre of your waistband and the back of the skirt as before and pin them both together. For the back waistband, you shouldn't have as much excess fabric on either side as you did for the front. Then just sew it together and iron the seam towards the waistband. Now here's where things get a bit different. So if you are not using grommets, here's what you're going to do. Now take your back ties and cut them in half. Then you're going to want to pin them to the right side of the waistband, just like you did for the front ties. Fold your waistband in half and then sew down the shortest edge. Trim any excess fabric and turn them right sides out, and you should have a similar sort of design as your front ties, but just the ties will be smaller. Now fold the rest of your waistband in half, making sure that you cover the raw edge in the inside with the hem you ironed at the beginning. Once it's all pinned down and you can't see any raw edges, over sew down your waistband. Now here's what you're going to do if you are using grommets. Fold your waistband in half right sides together and sew down the two shortest edges. Trim any excess fabric and clip the corners and then turn it right sides out. Then you can pin the rest of the waistband together like you did on the front waistband, making sure that all the raw edges on the inside are covered. Then over sew down the waistband. Then you're going to want to add your grommets to either side of the waistband. I generally fit about 2 on either side. Then you can thread your back ties through the grommets, almost like a corset. And there you are, your back waistband is all done. Now we have one final thing to do to complete your entire skirt, and that is to simply hem the bottom. So I use an overlocker and I generally edge the bottom of the skirt and then sew a 1/4 inch hem. Or you could iron a double hem of 1/4 inch and then another 1/4 inch and sew it closed. And there you are, your skirt is completely done.